All right, so you wanted to take a deep dive into Jim Collins's Good to Great. And I gotta say, revisiting this book always gets me pumped up.
It's such a classic.
It is. We're talking about companies that went from just okay to completely dominating their industries, and not just for like a hot minute, right? But for sustained, long-term success.
Yeah, what really blew my mind when I first read Collins' research was just how counterintuitive some of those good to great principles are.
Yeah.
Like take level 5 leadership, for example. It totally flips the script on that whole like classic image of a super charismatic, in-your-face leader.
Okay, so I'm curious then, what's so different about level 5 leaders?
Well,
I mean, you'd think ambition and a really strong personality are like prerequisites for getting to the top, right?
yeah, you would think that, right?
You would.
But Collins found that the truly great leaders, like the ones who led companies to that great status,
Yeah.
they actually had this paradoxical blend of like fierce resolve and personal humility.
So they're not afraid to make those tough calls, but they don't need to be the center of attention.
Exactly.
Yeah, I could see how that might throw some people off. It's not exactly the leadership style you see on magazine covers.
Not at all. Think about Darwin Smith at Kimberly-Clark.
Okay, yeah.
He decided to sell off their beloved paper mills, which was hugely unpopular at the time.
Wow.
To focus on consumer products, it was a risky move, but he was totally convinced it was the right thing for the long-term success of the company.
And it paid off big time, but I bet Smith was out there doing the victory lap, right?
Nope, not even close.
Yeah.
He actually attributed the company's success to luck
Wow.
and gave all the credit to his team.
Hmm.
It's a powerful reminder that level 5 leaders are driven by something way bigger than their own egos.
Yeah.
They're committed to building something truly great that will last.
It makes you wonder if that lack of ego is actually the secret sauce to building a really great team.
Oh, totally.
Because if the leader isn't obsessed with taking all the credit, it creates space for everyone else to shine, right?
100%. And, that actually segues perfectly into another one of Collins' key principles. First, who, then what?
Oh, yeah. Love that one.
Right. It might sound obvious, but how many companies really, truly prioritize getting the right people on board before figuring out their direction?
Well, Collins has that awesome bus analogy, right?
Yeah.
Get the right people on the bus, get the wrong people off, and then figure out where to drive it.
Exactly.
But does it really work that way in the real world? Especially, in today's crazy, fast-paced business world. Isn't there this pressure to just move quickly and figure things out as you go?
I mean, it is tempting to just dive in head first.
It is.
But think about this. If you have a team full of super capable, motivated individuals, people who really align with your core values, they can adapt to whatever comes their way and figure out the best path forward together.
Okay, that's a good point. I'm starting to see how these principles work together.
Yeah.
Like, if you get the right people on the bus, then it becomes less about dictating a plan from the top down and more about trusting your team to navigate the journey.
Exactly.
But what happens when that journey hits a major roadblock?
That's where the Stockdale Paradox comes in. This one's named after Admiral James Stockdale,
Okay, yeah.
who was a prisoner of war during the Vietnam War.
So we're talking about a guy who's been through hell and back.
Yeah.
What can he teach us about building great companies?
So Stockdale endured years of brutal captivity, but he never lost faith that he would eventually be freed.
Wow.
But, and this is key to the paradox, he never let himself fall into blind optimism.
Oh, interesting.
He faced the harsh realities of his situation head on. He knew that clinging to false hope would make him less resilient, less able to adapt and survive.
So it's all about finding that balance
Yeah.
between unwavering faith and having a clear view of reality.
Exactly.
Honestly, that just sounds like a valuable mindset for anyone, not just CEOs going through a crisis.
Right, and in a business context,
Yeah.
it means acknowledging the brutal facts of a situation, whether that's like a market downturn or a tough competitor,
Right.
while still having faith in your company's ability to overcome it.
So it's like saying, hey, we're in a tough spot, but we're going to figure this out.
Exactly.
There's like this sense of grounded optimism in that approach.
Yeah.
But how do you actually translate that optimism into a solid plan of action?
That brings us to what might be Collins's most famous principle, the Hedgehog Concept.
Yes.
It's based on that ancient Greek parable of the fox and the hedgehog.
Oh, I love a good analogy.
So the fox is cunning and knows a lot of things.
Yeah.
But the hedgehog only knows one big thing and is amazing at it.
Okay, so how does this fox and hedgehog story apply to building a great company?
Okay, so think of it this way. A company that tries to be everything to everyone, constantly chasing new opportunities and spreading itself too thin is like the fox.
Makes sense.
It might be clever,
Yeah.
but it lacks focus.
So the hedgehog, with its one big thing, represents a company that knows what it's truly great at and puts all of its energy into that.
Exactly. And Collins actually gives a framework for finding your hedgehog concept.
Okay.
It's based on 3 intersecting circles. What you could be the best in the world at what drives your economic engine and what you're deeply passionate about.
Makes total sense. If you're passionate about what you're doing and it aligns with your core competencies and your business model, that's a recipe for something special.
Right.
It's like all the pieces just click into place.
Yeah, it's about finding that sweet spot where your strengths, your passions, and your economic reality all come together. And when you nail that, it creates this incredible force for lasting success.
So do you have a good example of a company that really nailed their hedgehog concept?
Yeah, Walgreens is a great one.
Okay.
They could have tried to be everything to everyone in retail,
Right.
but they realized that their real strength was convenience.
Hmm.
By focusing on easily accessible locations and having a really efficient real estate strategy,
Yeah.
they became the dominant player in the pharmacy world.
So it's not just about having a good product or service. It's about finding that unique space where you can really own it.
Exactly.
It's about being the hedgehog, not the fox.
Exactly.
But once you have that focus, how do you maintain it over time?
Well, that's where a culture of discipline comes in now, before you picture like a super rigid, rule-bound environment. Let me clarify what Collins means here.
Oh, okay, because I gotta admit, the word discipline doesn't exactly scream creativity or innovation,
Right.
which we know are crucial for any company trying to stay ahead of the curve.
It's not about that at all. A culture of discipline is really about giving people the freedom to take disciplined actions.
Okay.
It's not about micromanaging or having a stifling bureaucracy. It's about creating an environment where people are self-motivated
Right?
and aligned with the company's core values and goals.
So you're saying if you have the right people on the bus, they'll naturally be disciplined and hold themselves accountable.
That's it. And when everyone's operating within that framework of shared values and clear expectations,
Yeah.
you don't need a ton of oversight or constant course correction.
It's about creating a culture of trust and empowerment,
Yes.
where everyone's rowing in the same direction because they actually believe in the mission.
Exactly.
Not because they're always being told what to do. It's like a well-oiled machine where every part runs smoothly and efficiently because everyone gets their role.
That's a great way to put it. But even the best-oiled machines need to adapt and evolve to stay relevant, especially with how fast technology is changing.
And that's where things get interesting because technology is often seen as the key to innovation and disruption. So how do these good to great companies approach technology in a way that actually helps them succeed without losing sight of those core principles?
Yeah, let's dive into that in the next segment.
Sounds good. So we've talked about how good to great companies are really disciplined and focused. But how do they handle technology? Because it feels like that's always changing and pushing companies to move faster.
Yeah, it is a tough balance.
It is.
Like on the one hand, you don't want to be left behind as technology changes.
Right?
But on the other hand, you don't want to get caught up in every trend and lose sight of your hedgehog concept.
Right. So are you saying that these good to great companies are like slow to adopt new technologies? Like they're kind of intentionally holding themselves back?
Not quite. It's a little more nuanced than that. Collins actually found that these companies were very strategic about how they use technology.
Okay.
They didn't jump on every bandwagon.
Okay.
They waited until the technology was proven and, more importantly, aligned with their hedgehog concept.
So it's not about being anti-technology.
Yeah.
It's about being intentional.
Exactly.
Like asking yourself, how is this technology going to help us become the best in the world at what we do?
Right. Technology should help you achieve your goals, not distract you from them.
It should be like a tool to boost your strengths and push your flywheel forward.
That's a great way to put it. And actually, that brings us to another good to great concept, the flywheel and the doom loop.
Oh, yeah. Remind me about that one.
Okay, so picture a giant flywheel.
Okay.
It's heavy,
Yeah.
and it's hard to get moving at first.
Yeah.
But with every push, with every small win, it gains momentum, and eventually it's spinning like effortlessly.
Makes sense.
That's the flywheel effect.
Yeah.
It's about steady, incremental progress over time.
So you're not looking for like one huge breakthrough.
No.
More like a series of small strategic steps that build on each other.
Exactly.
So I guess that's the opposite of the doom loop then.
The doom loop is all about reacting impulsively to setbacks. So imagine a company that's struggling with sales.
Okay.
Instead of sticking to their hedgehog concept and making those small improvements, They panic.
Yeah.
They chase after the newest trend, hoping for a quick fix.
It's like they're constantly changing direction so they never actually gain any traction.
Yeah, they're stuck in this reactive cycle instead of building that steady momentum.
Do you have a good example of a company that really, like, avoided that doom loop and embraced the flywheel?
Yeah, Abbott Laboratories is a great example. They didn't become great overnight. It was a slow and steady process of continuous improvement, just making small but impactful changes over time, and eventually they ended up outperforming the market for like decades.
It makes you wonder if we put too much emphasis on disrupting everything.
It's an interesting thought.
Like maybe the real key to success is more about discipline and patience rather than constantly trying to change everything.
Yeah, that's a good point. But even with discipline and patience, things can still go wrong, right?
Right.
Like markets shift, competitors pop up, and sometimes even the best plans just don't work out.
So then how did these good to great companies deal with those setbacks? Do they just like double down and hope for the best?
That's where another important principle comes in. Confront the brutal facts.
Okay, that sounds kind of intense. What does that actually mean in practice? Are you saying we all just need to be like brutally honest with each other all the time?
Not necessarily. It's more about creating a culture where everyone values the truth and where people feel safe to speak up, even if they have bad news or if they disagree with what everyone else is thinking.
I can see how that would be tough for some leaders to handle.
It can be.
And nobody likes to give bad news, and some leaders might see it as challenging their authority.
You're right. That's why Collins talks about having a red flag mechanism where anyone in the company, regardless of their position, can raise a concern if they see something that seems off.
So it's like having a built-in early warning system where everyone's watching out for potential problems.
That's a great way to think about it, but that only works if people feel comfortable speaking up without being punished, right?
Of course.
And that requires a leader who's actually willing to listen, to consider different opinions, even admit when they're wrong.
So it goes back to that level 5 leadership style again.
He does.
Humility and resolve, they got to go together.
Exactly. And when you have that kind of leadership, plus a culture where people feel comfortable being open and honest,
Yeah.
well, then you create an environment where you can catch problems and solve them before they become huge disasters.
It's like that saying, sunlight is the best disinfectant, right?
Exactly.
Bringing issues out in the open helps everyone make better decisions and get better outcomes.
Absolutely. Now, it's super important to face the facts and adapt as things change. But it's also important to stay true to your core values.
Right. That's the preserve the core, stimulate progress principle. Finding that balance between staying true to your roots while still embracing innovation and growth.
Exactly.
But how do you know which values are really core and which ones might need to change as the company grows and the world changes?
Now, that is a great question, and it's one that every company has to wrestle with.
Yeah, it feels like figuring out your core values is almost like defining your company's DNA.
That's a really good way to put it. And just like with DNA, core values provide that blueprint for how the company should operate, how decisions should be made, and even how people should treat each other.
Yeah, it's about creating that shared understanding of what the company represents, what it believes in, and what it's ultimately working toward.
Exactly. Think of a company like 3M.
Okay.
Their core value of innovation has been there for over 100 years, even as they've grown into all these different markets and product categories.
That's amazing. So it's not about just clinging to tradition for tradition's sake. It's about figuring out those core values that are timeless and then finding ways to express them in new and interesting ways.
Yeah, 3M's commitment to innovation is what led to inventions like Post-it notes
Yeah.
and Scotch tape. I mean, we take those for granted now, but they were totally revolutionary back then, and it all goes back to that core value.
It makes you think that maybe the most innovative companies are actually the ones that are the most grounded in their core values. Like it gives them this solid foundation to take risks and try new things without losing sight of who they are.
That's a really good point, and it actually leads us to another principle that seems pretty simple, but is often forgotten when people get caught up in making things complicated.
You're talking about the importance of simplicity, right?
Yes.
I've got to say, I'm intrigued by this one. In a world that seems to love overthinking and making things super complex, it feels almost rebellious to just say, keep it simple.
It kind of is, but it's also super powerful. Good to great companies get that clarity is a huge advantage. They try to create strategies that are easy to understand and put into action, no unnecessary complexity or confusion.
So it's not about dumbing things down. It's about getting rid of all the distractions and focusing on what really matters.
Exactly, and that applies to so much in business. Think about your company's mission statement. Is it clear and easy for everyone to get, or is it just a bunch of jargon?
Oof, okay. That one hit a little close to home.
Yeah.
I've definitely seen some mission statements that are more about trying to sound smart than actually saying anything meaningful.
I feel it. And what about your product or service? Can you explain it simply and in a way that anyone can understand, or is it hidden behind a bunch of technical details and marketing speak?
It's about getting to the heart of what you do, why it matters, and how it helps your customers. You got to strip away all the extra stuff and let that core value shine through.
Yes, exactly. And it's not just about talking to people outside the company. Simplicity is important for internal stuff too, like processes and decisions.
Yeah.
How many times have you been in a meeting that got lost in the details or went on forever without actually getting anything done?
You're speaking my language. It's way too easy to get lost in the weeds and forget about the big picture.
It is. That's why it's so important to really embrace simplicity. Always ask yourself, what can we simplify? What can we get rid of? What can we make easier?
And it's not just about working faster. It's about creating a more focused and enjoyable work environment.
Totally.
When things are simple and clear, it reduces stress and lets people be more creative and productive.
100%. And that brings us back to the core of good to great. It's about building a culture where people feel empowered to do their best work, where everyone's working towards a common goal and always striving for excellence.
Yeah, it's about building something that lasts, something bigger than any one person, something truly great.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into good to great, I want to leave you with something to think about. Imagine you're on your own good to great journey. Maybe you're leading a team or going after a personal goal or even building a company.
Yeah.
What can you do today to start creating that culture of greatness?
That's a great question to consider. This has been an awesome journey exploring all these timeless principles from good to great.
It really has.
We've uncovered some fascinating examples and actionable takeaways that we can use in our own lives and careers.
It's been a pleasure diving deep with you. And remember, the journey to greatness never really ends.
It doesn't.
It takes continuous learning adaptation and that commitment to being the best you can be.
Exactly like the companies in Collins research. We've got to keep pushing that flywheel, embracing the challenges, and striving to become the best versions of ourselves.
I love that.
Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep diving deep.